Hello and welcome to How to Get Over It with myself, Candice Mama, and of course, Justin Cohen. Today we are speaking about how to get over insomnia. Now, I don't know a single person who hasn't at one stage or another suffered with insomnia. But before we even go into it, what is insomnia?
Well, Ken, insomnia comes in different forms. It might be the inability to go to sleep. It might be waking up in the middle of the night and then not being able to go to sleep. It's also defined in different ways. If you're having it for longer than a week, then it tends to be classified as moderate insomnia. But if it's something that you have on a night or another night, and that's very natural. Everybody's going to have a night of sleep that is not that great. And in fact, that's a very important distinction, a night of sleep that is not that great. There are very few people who will not sleep the entire night. In fact, one of the misconceptions that people have about their own insomnia is that they didn't sleep the whole night. If you think about how people talk about their insomnia, oh, I never got a wink, and or I was up all night. And it's not impossible, it does happen, but it's very, very rare. So there's actually quite a lot of what we call sleep misperception, people actually thinking that in fact, you even have cases where people are actually asleep for the whole night, but they perceive themselves as not having gone to sleep. And that's real. Like if they are then tired the next day and they are not able to stay alert, then perhaps the quality of their sleep was compromised. But in fact, yeah, some of those people actually slept the whole night.
So what causes insomnia, Jess?
Well, Ken, there are many causes, and it's useful to eliminate the organic causes first, the medical causes, right? So you could have sleep apnea, which is an issue around oxygen and breathing. There could be drug addiction. Obviously, you're using a lot of stimulants, you're not going to be able to sleep. And there are some other medical issues as well. Now, we're not going to go deep into those issues today, but yes, if you suspect that you might have an organic issue, that there might actually be something physically wrong that is keeping you awake, you want to go to a doctor. There's a lot of sleep clinics now who can verify what is going on there. So yes, absolutely eliminate those causes, particularly if you have got chronic insomnia, as in, this has been going on for weeks and months and perhaps even years. But I can tell you that the majority of people do not have a physiological problem, right? So people sometimes think they do, but actually most people do not have a physiological problem. Most insomnia is actually related to our psychology, to our mental state.
Wow. So what are some of the traditional methods that people tend to do when it comes to insomnia?
Well, firstly, this has become a real industry, the insomnia industry. In fact, there's just been a major supplement at Time magazine this past week. I think it was about 8 pages dedicated to insomnia. We also know, by the way, that about 20 to 30% of people at any one time are suffering from insomnia. And over a year, half of all people, that's 50% of all people, will experience insomnia. So it is really widespread, possibly exacerbated by the pandemic, because certainly when times are difficult, when there are challenges, that is going to affect our sleep as well. So the traditional treatments, almost the first line treatments for insomnia, are all about sleep hygiene, right? And I'm sure everybody out there is to some degree familiar with that. Yeah. And if you're having a cup of coffee just before bed, you're probably going to have difficulty sleeping. Yeah. And so it's just checking in on, okay, let's just make sure, I'm not drinking coffee. By the way, alcohol is also not great. People do use alcohol to put themselves to sleep. And here's the problem with alcohol is it is a relaxant, or at least it activates a relaxant in the brain called GABA. But the problem is when alcohol wears off, like many drugs, there's a rebound effect. So alcohol suppresses also a stimulant called glutamate. And when the alcohol starts to wear off, which it does often in the middle of the night, then that glutamate, which is a stimulant, will actually re-emerge. And that's why you can then wake up in the middle of the night. Or you might stay asleep the whole night, but just not have a very effective sleep. So alcohol, yes, it may get you to sleep, but it can interfere with the kind of quality of sleep that you have. And by the way, that actually applies to sleeping pills as well, which we'll get to a little bit later, because obviously a lot of people are using those and there's some real dangers associated with that. But some of the dangers are actually similar to alcohol in that it'll get you asleep, but it actually isn't going to give you the sleep that you need. So sleep hygiene is making sure that, we're not drinking stimulants. Chocolate obviously has caffeine as well. A lot of sugar before you go to bed, not a good idea. Eating before you go to bed, having a big meal is going to, your body's going to be digesting that, and that keeps you awake, right? Because that's going to stimulate your whole physiological system. So I think many of these things are quite obvious to people, but perhaps they are worthwhile mentioning, just in case anybody out there is missing some of these. Exercising just before you go to bed is usually not ideal. It is good to exercise, though. In fact, exercise has been found to be tremendously helpful for insomnia, just a regular exercise program, but preferably exercising earlier in the day rather than just before you go to bed at night. Having a warm shower before you go to bed. Blue light screens, I think we all now know, are not a good idea. When you got a screen that wakes you up, those lights wake you up, they're stimulating. So to rather keep those lights off. And then having some kind of bedtime ritual, quietening things down before you go to bed. So those, and then of course you've got this whole industry, right? The insomnia industry. So you've got what mattress and what sheets. And I have a bit of a concern with that. I see there's a mattress company which bills itself as the cure for insomnia. And this article at the time was saying they spent $80 million, God bless them, $80 million just on their Instagram marketing campaign, right? And the Instagram marketing campaign is all about people telling you how incredible their sleep was and how they were able to sleep because they slept on this mattress. Now, again, everybody's got to make a buck. And listen, I'm sure it's a great mattress, don't get me wrong, and it might be really good for your back, and it might be a whole bunch of things. But I don't think your insomnia is going to be solved by your mattress, by your pillow, by what device you happen to have in and out of your bed. And as I say, Ken, this is becoming a multi-billion-dollar industry. It is massive, massive. And there's very little evidence to show that these sorts of things are critical. What they do is they get you to spend a lot of money. And here's my concern about sleep hygiene. So let me first say, yes, absolutely, let's check, make sure that we're not doing things that are obviously going to interfere with our sleep. But then I think sleep hygiene can become sleep hygiene obsession. And obsession is never a good idea if you're trying to go to sleep. Because if you are obsessed about having every single light and material object and pre-sleep ritual in absolute perfection before you sleep, you will not sleep, right? Because you're never going to have it all perfect. You're never going to have it all perfect. As you go to sleep, you're going to hear something. There might be the traffic. So that's just not a good idea, right? Having this whole list. And I've worked with people, they've got this extensive, and I don't understand. I don't understand why I can't sleep because, I've got the pillow and I've got the mattress and I'm making sure I'm having a warm shower before I go to bed and I'm not eating. I'm like, dude, that's why you're not sleeping. That's why you are not sleeping, because you are obsessed with sleeping. And I know that anybody who has insomnia, I get it. You can develop this obsession about getting everything right. But the problem is if you're trying to get everything right, well, first, you're never going to get everything right. And secondly, you focused on the wrong thing. Because while those things are helpful, that's not ultimately what it is. Because the fact is, people do go to sleep with the lights on. I'm not saying we should, but people even go to sleep with caffeine. It's possible, right? So again, I'm not saying that you should be doing those things. I'm saying that clearly that's not imperative, right? Because you don't need perfect silence and perfect light and perfect mattress. Otherwise, nobody would be sleeping because the vast majority of people don't have those things in place, right? So clearly, this is not essential. Helpful, but not essential.
Mm. And going into the pharmaceutical side of it, Jess, I want to speak about two different areas of this. A lot of people who suffer with insomnia will go to the doctor and the doctor will give them a sleeping tablet. And people who are opposed to that traditional sleeping tablet will maybe take like a herbal supplement that is said to have the same effect, like a melatonin. So I want to hear your take on both of those.
Right. So the FDA in the United States, Federal Drug Administration, has now put black box warnings on sleeping tablets, very commonly used sleeping tablets like Ambien that's commonly used in the US. Finally, they put these like they just realized. What is a black box warning? It's this is dangerous, this can hurt you, this is damaging, you should probably not be using this unless you really have to. So let me be clear. Every once in a while, having a sleeping tablet is not the end of the world. If I do a long haul flight, particularly if I'm flying economy and it's 16 hours and I'm going Joburg, New York, yes, I will sometimes have a sleeping tablet. So, once in a while, it's not a problem. If you are using them regularly, it's a problem. Why is it a problem? So firstly, it depends on which sleeping tablet we're talking about, but a lot of the sleeping tablets are benzodiazepines, which are actually used for anxiety. Benzodiazepines, by the way, Jordan Peterson, the great rock star intellectual, who I have a lot of admiration for, has nearly died from a benzodiazepine addiction. He's that's just come out, and I certainly recommend anybody who's on benzodiazepines like Xano or Xanax or Stilnox or some of these sleeping tablets to watch that interview, because it's pretty horrifying. Now, that's Jordan Peterson and his specific incident. Not everybody's taking benzos that's not going to happen to everyone. Let me be very clear. I don't want to be alarmist about this. Again, having this once in a while is not a problem. But here's the issue with these drugs, Ken, and we've spoken about this with regards to anxiety as well. If you take a benzodiazepine, a Xano, or Xanax, you are going to feel better. In fact, that's very similar to alcohol, right? In that it also activates GABA, which is one of the brain's own natural relaxants. But you have three problems that are shared by illegal drugs. As you know, I have a major issue with the way we create this sort of artificial line between legal and illegal. The worst drug dealer on the planet is called Purdue, who created a drug called OxyContin, which is an opioid. 80% of heroin users started on prescribed prescribed opiates that their doctor in a nice white coat gave them a drug that turned them into a heroin addict. And we now have an epidemic that's actually reduced longevity in the United States. So when people start with legal and illegal and drug dealers, the drug dealer down the road gets thrown in prison for the rest of his life. Purdue pay a fine and they're still peddling their drugs. Now, again, I have no issue with an opioid for certain conditions, right? I'm not ideologically opposed to drugs, but it's important to understand what it is that they do. So, and by the way, opioids are also used sometimes for sleep, but usually that would be when people can't sleep because of physical pain. And again, occasionally that is appropriate, but they were so overprescribed that there's now an epidemic. So let's talk about benzos, because a lot of sleeping tablets are benzodiazepines. Very similar to anxiety. What it's going to do is it's going to activate a GABA. You are then going to feel better. So if you're anxious, you're going to feel better. And in the right dose and the right kind, you're also going to be able to go to sleep. But here's the problem. Very similar to alcohol, you're going to have three things happening. One, you develop a tolerance. So you need more and more and more to get the same effect. Two, you have withdrawal symptoms. So when you come off it, you can get very ill. This is what happened to Jordan Peterson. In his own words, benzodiazepines nearly killed me when I came off them. Right? So you can have withdrawal symptoms. Again, that's not happening to everyone. If you're taking them for a very short period of time, that's fine. If you're taking them regularly, you have to be very careful how you come off them. In fact, anybody here who is currently on them, please don't come off them because of what I'm saying here. If you're going to come off this drug, you need to do it with a psychiatrist, ideally. Your GP is not really qualified. But most GPs are overprescribing these drugs. And it does make me angry. They are overprescribing these drugs. I'm sympathetic to them, because they have patients, so many patients, they see patients for 5 minutes. Patient comes in, is anxious, can't sleep. The easiest thing is just give them a sleeping tablet, give them a benzo. It's easy. And a lot of doctors are doing a lot of good work, and they're doing this maybe not knowing better, and also just because they don't have the time to do more. Ideally, when you start working with these drugs, you should be doing it with a psychiatrist. And the truth is, psychiatrists don't always get it right either. But at least that they can get you off the drug properly and tape it off, because you don't want to just come off, particularly if you're on a high dose and you've been there for a long time, because you can get those withdrawal symptoms. And then, the other big problem is the rebound effect. So what happens is, as you come off the drug, you can then have a depletion of that neurotransmitter, and so you feel even worse. And that was my experience, right? When I had my anxiety disorder, I tried a benzo. I didn't do this for a very long time, but for a period of time when I was really desperate and I wanted to try different things, some people know my own personal story, that's what happened. You do feel better, and then you have this rebound, and then you feel worse, right? So it is just not a long-term solution. In fact, we actually see that benzodiazepines and alcohol have actually pretty much the same effects on anxiety. They make it worse. Meta-studies show over time they make it much worse, and the same applies to sleep, right? So if you're using these drugs, the problem is, yes, they put you to sleep, but the quality of the sleep is not great. So you don't get into the very deep sleep. You don't also get into the REM sleep. You get to REM sleep, but not enough of it. And those forms of sleep are very important. Particularly the deep sleep. That's that restorative sleep. So, you can go to sleep. And that's why some people with insomnia go, I felt to me like I didn't sleep, even though that they did. They may not have been in a very deep sleep, right? So we have different sleep, which is correlated with different brain waves. So this is why those prescription drugs are not great. They're addictive. They have the rebound effect, withdrawal. You need more and more. And so, yes, once in a while, like it's this night, you've got a big day tomorrow, you can't sleep, fine. But you do not want to be using this every day. Now, in answer to your question, yes, there are alternatives. I'm not very familiar with the over-the-counter alternatives. The one I would recommend that I am personally familiar with is an antihistamine. So if you go to the pharmacy and you ask for sort of an over-the-counter sleeping aid, they'll give you an antihistamine. And what an antihistamine does is it makes you drowsy. So it's not very effective for a lot of people, but it can be effective for some people. Years ago, I remember trying it and finding it somewhat effective. And then obviously it has the benefits of not being addictive. There's no real withdrawal symptoms. You could be a little bit drowsy the next day, but you just don't have the same problems. And to my knowledge, I don't think you have the same problems with the benzos in that you don't get into the deeper sleep. I think with the antihistamine, once you're asleep, you'll then have a regularly normal sleep. So yeah, I would say if somebody just feels that they want something that's not dangerous, again, we don't want to be doing this every day, but it's not particularly dangerous, right? And that you don't have major withdrawal symptoms. So that's an over-the-counter antihistamine. And then you get, I think the research is a bit patchy on melatonin. I don't think it's entirely clear. I've spoken to some people who swear by it. It's not always clear whether something's a placebo effect or not. By the way, if it's a placebo, great. If it's making you sleep, great. The good thing about melatonin is it's not dangerous, right? It's not like the reason the FDA put a black box warning on these sleeping tablets is because they are dangerous. There's no black box warning on melatonin or antihistamine because they're not dangerous. They, as I say, not without some issues, but certainly not dangerous in that respect. So yeah, I think, if you find that lavender or, whatever it is, some sort of homeopathic remedy or an alternative remedy works for you, that's great. That's fine. But again, Ken, my concern is we don't want this to then be, as I was saying, that sleep hygiene obsession of, no, I can't sleep because I don't have my lavender. I can't sleep because I don't have my this or my that or the other, right? That's the danger here.
Oh, wow. And I think your passion is, important to note, because I think so many of us trust that if someone is a medical professional and they're prescribing something to you, that they're doing it in your best interest. And I think, hearing your outlook on it and just seeing how dangerous these treatments actually are in reality for us, and that you can't just trust something that is being prescribed, or because, pharmacists say, no, take it, you'll be fine. And then you have these withdrawal symptoms, which no one speaks about.
Well, that's it, Ken. And I think it's this appeal to authority. Man comes in a white coat, takes out his prescription. He's got 7 years. And even psychiatrists who I have a lot of respect for. Psychiatrists, you have to study for many, many years. You really have to understand the brain and the neurotransmission. A lot of people are now cocktails of drugs, this drug to overcome the side effects of that drug, to overcome the side of that drug. And there's actually an organization called innercompass.org. Anybody who wants to responsibly get off their drugs, and you do not just do this on your own, you can send you to massive withdrawal. But innercompass.org, great organization in the United States, run by medical professionals that can help you to responsibly get off, particularly those cocktails of drugs. Many people have found once they've got off the cocktail, they're better than they were without them. Now, I'm not saying some people can't benefit. I'm talking about somebody with a mental disorder, cannot benefit from a drug. But what happens is over years, you can suddenly find yourself on this cocktail. And if you feel that you're one of those people, check out innercompass.org, because they're really doing great work in helping people get off their drugs.
Wow. So just how do we get over insomnia?
So Kat, I want to back up a little bit because, and I know you've said, you asked me the question, what causes insomnia? And I said, well, there's some, could be medical, could be, but we want to make sure that those physiological conditions are not what is responsible, which is the case for most people, right? So for most people, it is psychological. But I'd like to talk a little bit about the nature of the human mind, because I think this is going to give us a really important insight into why insomnia is so prevalent, and that's going to help us to see the solution. So Ken, as you know, in many of the interviews that we've done on anxiety and panic and how we apply the transcendent principles to those, we've had a very good look at what anxiety is. And the reason that I want to talk a little bit about anxiety is because even for somebody out there who does not think of themselves as having an anxiety disorder or perhaps even being anxious, anxiety is usually at play in insomnia. I would say for most people with insomnia, there's some form of anxiety. Doesn't mean that they've got an anxiety disorder, but it means that anxiety is keeping them awake, because anxiety is arousal. It's hyper-arousal. If you think about it, why can't I sleep? I'm aroused, right? Not in a fun way. Well, I guess you could be in a fun way as well, but you're aroused, right? You're psychologically aroused. That's why you can't sleep, right? Think about it. Sleep is the opposite of arousal. Now, anxiety is negative arousal. Positive arousal could also keep you awake, by the way. I mean, if anybody out there has ever been really excited about something happening the next day, it might be their birthday, maybe it's their wedding, something really great, that can also keep you awake, right? So positive arousal can also keep you awake. But most of the time, what's keeping people awake is negative arousal, and most negative arousal is anxiety. So what is anxiety? So anxiety is a feeling of nervousness in response to a perceived threat, right? We always make this distinction. Fear is a response to real threat. Anxiety is a response to perceived threat. And if you think about it, when you're trying to go to sleep, if there was a real threat, you wouldn't be trying to go to sleep, right? Okay, you would just, like, I'm not trying to go to sleep now with a guy pointing a gun at me. I really don't want to go to sleep. But you're going to sleep because you're going, well, there's no real threat right now. But your head is obsessed with some kind of perceived threat. Now, that threat might be what's going to happen tomorrow. There's work. There's maybe a financial issue. There's something going on with your kids. Are they going to school in the time that we're doing this of the coronavirus? How's the pandemic going to affect me? And so what's keeping us awake is the mind focusing on some kind of perceived threat. Yeah. And that's what anxiety is all about. And that's why the transcendent principles, which work so well with regards to anxiety and all the anxiety disorders, work really, really well for insomnia. And I've seen this because I've worked with people who've been insomnia for years. They've applied these principles and it's resolved their insomnia. So this really works. But anybody who's not familiar needs to know. Needs a quick little summary here, right? So we have what I call an overreactive threat detection system. And this evolved, right? This evolved for our caveman ancestors because they were in continual threat of being eaten by a hungry tiger or uncle, right? They had continual threat. And the ones who survived didn't sit around singing It's a Beautiful Life or sleeping nicely. They stayed alert. They stayed alert, right? And in fact, if you think about it, sleep, when you are sleeping, you're at your most vulnerable. You are at your most vulnerable. There's one time that you can be hurt, injured, killed. It is when you are sleeping, right? It's why kids often have a lot of fear around sleeping, yeah? Because, it's dark and what is dark? It's dark, I can't see. somebody comes in, they hurt me, right? So there's a very primal anxiety around sleep. In fact, we could call it a primal fear, because that was a real threat, particularly for our caveman ancestors. So to go to sleep, you need to feel safe. You need to feel safe, right? Now, if you're going to bed and you're thinking about what went wrong today, or what's going to go wrong tomorrow, or what you need to do, or what you need to fix, or what you need to control, your brain's going to say, you can't go to sleep. Your brain's actually doing you a favor, in its own mind, that part of your mind. And I talk about the brain almost as if it's a separate person, but sometimes it can be helpful to do that, because in some way the brain is actually modular. So there's that part of the brain that I call the overactive threat detection system, which is in the reptilian brain, the lower brain, which we share with reptiles, where we have the fight or flight response. And the flight or fight response is triggered by adrenaline and cortisol, right? It wants you to move to fight or flight. So if you're feeling anxious, you're highly adrenalized. Now, adrenaline is not the sleep hormone, right? You don't go to sleep on adrenaline. You start fighting or flighting, right? That's what you do on adrenaline. So if we are to get into a state that enables us to sleep, we need to reduce that arousal, right? Now, one thing you can do is some kind of relaxation or meditation, and that's certainly helpful before you go to bed. And we'll talk a little bit more about that a bit later. And that's why pre-sleep rituals can be helpful, not certainly reducing stimulation. And people will say before an hour before you go to bed that you don't watch TV and you don't read, and so you're not highly stimulated, and you're certainly not working, you're certainly not having an argument with someone, right? Because all of that's going to boost your adrenaline and cortisol. But while that is certainly can be helpful, you can do 10 hours of relaxation and meditation. If you are still focused on some kind of perceived threat, it doesn't matter, right? In fact, this is where relaxation can actually create even more anxiety, because relaxation, it's like turning down the alarm, the internal alarm. What's the opposite of relaxation is the stress response and the relaxation response. And these are actually different parts of the autonomic nervous system. So the stress response is the sympathetic nervous system. The relaxation response is the parasympathetic nervous system. Now you can say, okay, well, I'm going to activate, because we know that to go to sleep, it's really helpful to have activated the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the relaxation response. That's really helpful. And that's why doing a deep breathing or relaxation or meditation can certainly get you into a good sleep state, or at least a state ready for sleep. However, if you are seriously concerned about something, you have some major anxiety, trying to turn down your alarm system, right, your stress response, your sympathetic nervous system. Imagine you really believe there's a burglar outside. The alarm goes off, and the alarm goes off, and then you turn the alarm off. Are you going to feel better or worse? You're going to feel worse. You're like, no, dude, you turned the alarm down, but there's something wrong, right? So in the same way, I can do a deep breathing, but if I really believe there's something seriously wrong that I need to fix or control, then in fact, trying to relax can actually create even more resistance and more arousal, right? So it backfires. So that's not to say, and we'll get to this, it's not to say that some form of relaxation can't be helpful, but that's not, in my experience, that's not going to cure insomnia. A deep breathing exercise, a meditation, relaxation is not going to cure insomnia. As long as you have a perceived threat that you need to deal with, you are going to be aroused, you are going to be awake, and by definition, you're not going to be able to sleep. So, in my experience, what we need to do is, in fact, let's use the art of life principles from the Transcender program. So that's action, reinterpretation, and transcendence, because each one of those can help us in terms of being able to sleep. So the question that we ask ourselves with any challenge in Transcend is, what can I do about it? Like, what can I physically do about it? Now, that's not always the solution to everything, but we've in fact really answered that question with insomnia, right? What can I do? Okay, what I can do is I can make sure that I'm not drinking caffeine or alcohol. What I can do is make sure that I'm not overstimulated before I go to bed, right? Perhaps not be watching, TV. What I can do is make sure that I'm not getting into deep conversations and arguments, right? These are also, all the sort of sleep hygiene stuff is what you can do. Again, I'm saying don't get obsessed with it. This is not actually the cure for insomnia, but it's helpful. There are certain things that you can do, absolutely, right? So yes, and perhaps we should also say on that point, yeah, if a Ferrari is traveling at 400 k's an hour, it's probably not a good idea to try and park at 400 k's an hour, right? You want to slow down. You want to slow down the car and reduce the arousal. So yes, one of the things that I do before I go to bed every night is I do transcendence training. Transcendence training is a particular form of meditation. And I say a particular form that's very important. There's a lot of different meditations. Some of them, in my experience, are not helpful, particularly for anxiety and insomnia. But there's a particular form. But anything that anybody is doing that relaxes them is fine as well. So, in fact, maybe we should spend a moment on this. Again, I want to reiterate, this is not the cure, but it can be helpful, like sleep hygiene. Again, it's not essential, but it can be helpful. So remember, we spoke about parasympathetic nervous system and sympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic is the stress response. Stress is arousal. Parasympathetic is relaxation. Relaxation is usually where we go to fall asleep. So one of the ways to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, that's the relaxation response. By the way, it's not sitting in front of the TV watching slouched in the couch. That's not, that doesn't put you into the relaxation response. You can actually stay very internally aroused when you do that. It's actually breathing, okay? So remember, the parasympathetic and sympathetic are part of the autonomic nervous system. So this is generally involuntary. By the way, have you noticed that sleep is somewhat involuntary? Sleep is one of these physiological states that kind of happens, right? Or it doesn't happen. And so we have to create the conditions for it to happen. Like if I said to you, Karen, okay, go to sleep. Come on now, sleep. It's impossible, right? It's not in your voluntary control to immediately go to sleep, is it? What you can do is create the conditions. So what would you do? You turn out the lights, you close the curtains, you maybe get under the blanket, because we know that when we lie down, our body temperature drops, which means we can get cold. And if we're cold, that's going to keep us awake. So you'd probably cover yourself, even if it was a warm day, you would probably cover yourself, right? And then you would go, and then you would leave it at that. And if you weren't an insomniac, you would then fall asleep. But you wouldn't fall asleep because you made yourself fall asleep. All you had done is created the conditions, right? The right conditions to go to sleep. Yeah, you don't go, it's not like eating. Okay, I'm not going to eat, right? That's voluntary. In a very real sense, sleep is something that happens somewhat involuntarily. Yeah. Now, and that's, we're going to get to the cure in a moment. But the conditions that we can create, one of them is to slow down the car, right? To slow down the car, right? Particularly if you've had a very aroused day, you want to slow it down. So that's why people talk about having a warm shower and those sorts of things, and you can do that. But one thing that can be very effective is just take a few minutes to do something that relaxes you, right? That doesn't focus you mentally. So it could be, now, one of the ways that we can access the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the relaxation response, which is the physiological state that usually leads to sleep, is through the breath. And this actually changes heart rate, breathing, and blood pressure. So we can't directly change our heart rate, breath, and blood pressure, but we can directly change our breath. So when we're in stress response, hyperarousal state, the kind of breathing is chest breathing. It's shallow. It's up there. It's if you're running away from a lion. You need short, sharp shots of oxygen into your body real quick, right? And you'll notice this. When you're stressed and aroused, you're breathing like this. Stress response breathing, right? That's the sympathetic nervous system. Now, parasympathetic relaxation response is a totally different kind of breathing. It's called diaphragmatic belly or belly. The diaphragm is a little muscle below the hands, belly breathing. So the way we do this, and we can actually do it together. If you put your hand on your tummy and you breathe in, your tummy goes out. And I know we do everything in our world to keep our tummies in, which is why many of us are not breathing properly. But that's very important because the air is blowing up your lungs like a balloon, and that's slightly compressing on your internal organs, which is pushing out your belly. That's why your tummy goes out. So breathe So you breathe in, tummy goes out, you breathe out, tummy goes in, okay? Now let me ask you this, when you breathe in, do you feel more stressed or relaxed? When you breathe out, do you feel more stressed or relaxed? You notice? When you breathe in, it's a little bit more stress.
Yeah.
Exactly. So there's actually a very subtle sympathetic nervous system response when we breathe in. That's the sympathetic is the stress response. And there's a subtle parasympathetic nervous system response. That's the relaxation response when we breathe out. And anybody who's doing this, you'll feel it. When you breathe out, you feel more relaxed. So knowing that, we can do a little breathing technique. Breathe in for the count of 2 and out on the word calm to 4 beats. Ka, ah, ah, ah. In on 2. Ka, ah, ah, and in on 2. Ka, ah, ah, ah. You feel that? It's quite amazing, isn't it? Just three slow, deep, rhythmic belly breaths. And we actually see shift of glucose, oxygen, nutrients from the lower brain, fight or flight, arousal, to the upper brain, to the prefrontal cortex. So this is a very powerful way to activate the parasympathetic nervous system and to relax. Now, you will notice when you are asleep or going to sleep or just before you go to sleep, you'll notice that this is how you breathe. You'll breathe this belly breathing. This happens naturally. So I hope anybody who's watching this, I hope that you just did this and experienced it for yourself. If you didn't, you can do it now. It's very simple. Breathing in on the count of 2, out on calm, and by saying the word calm instead of using the four counting to 4, what you're doing is you're just doing a little bit of self-hypnosis, right? You're just telling yourself to calm down. In on 2, out on calm. Very, very, very simple. And also by focusing on your breath, you're also taking your mind away from all those thoughts, which is what keeps us awake, right? So this technique is very useful in activating the relaxation response, which is where we need to be before we go to sleep. When we now get into the sleep, the breathing we're doing is very similar to what happens when we are asleep. So yes, when you're asleep, you're not necessarily going in on 2, out on 4. And by the way, you don't have to do that exact number. It just can be. You'll find when you're very relaxed, your out breath is longer. Usually is about double. That happens actually quite naturally. But this isn't a kind of like, nostril breathing. I mean, I know there's 50 kinds of breathing. It's using a technique that is actually happens naturally. That's all we're doing here. So remember, we're talking about the 3 strategies, right? The one is action. What can you do? So yes, you can make sure that the conditions are right for you to be able to sleep. And one of them is to slow down your mind, start to get a little more relaxed. You can do it through meditation. You can do it through prayer. You can do it through gratitude. Okay? Gratitude, there's actually some really, really interesting research on gratitude to show that gratitude helps people sleep. So if before you go to bed at night, you just focus on 5 things you're really grateful for, 5 good things that happened today. And I know it could be a really tough day where a bunch of things happen that you didn't want to have happen. But as you know, we asked this question in Transcender, what is good about it? What was good about my day? Are we really good at asking what's wrong with my day? Remember, hyperactive threat detection system, brain is twice as likely to notice threats as rewards, right? This is the negativity bias. That's why we are in a hyperreactive state, yeah? Threat detection state is because this is the way our brains evolved, right? To protect our caveman ancestors who were in continual threat. We're not. I know this sounds crazy, but we live in the most unprecedented comfort and safety in the history of humankind. Yes, even in the time of Corona. We have the highest longevity has never been high. It drops now in the United States because of a company called Purdue that sells drugs that have turned people into heroin addicts. But outside of that, longevity has gone up, healthcare has gone up, childhood mortality has gone down, poverty has increased, hunger has increased, crime has increased. And people say, yeah, South Africa crime has decreased. So that people say, come on, what about South Africa? Our crime rate is 0.003%. For our caveman ancestors, your chance of being murdered was 1 in 4. 1 in 4. So I think things are a little better. But you think, but why do we not perceive it that way? Our threat detectors, right? This is our operating system. That's how I always say, we need to update our operating system. It's time for an update. We know we've got to update those apps. We're going to Transcend is an update. It's an update for the mind, okay? Your mind is still, it's the same way. Look at the sugar and fat, okay? We know why we've got an obesity epidemic, because for our caveman ancestors, there was very little sugar and fat. And so any sugar and fat you needed to get, because that would extend your survival. Now we have an abundance of sugar and fat, but we still have brains that think that we've got to consume as much and keep as much inside our bodies, right? Very similar with threat. Back then, lots of threat, so very high threat reactivity. Today, very little threat, but still very high threat reactivity. So what happens? Instead of fear, we've got anxiety. Fear's response to real threat, anxiety response to perceived threats. I'm not saying that anybody out there doesn't have real threats, but what we do is we totally amplify them, we catastrophize, we make them much bigger and worse than they actually are. That's called anxiety. And it happens very naturally. Don't beat yourself up for it. We all do it. I did it. I got into an anxiety disorder doing it, right? So we all do it. But this is about Transcend, is about how we can update. Okay, so these are the things, those are the things we can do. We can create the conditions that are going to enable sleep to happen, but that will not guarantee that sleep will happen, right? So you can, as I said, you can do the deep breathing, you can do your gratitude, you can do your prayer, you can slow down the car. It's going to have a big effect, okay? There's no doubt it's going to have a big effect, but it is probably not going to be the cure. The cure is something more than that. So let's move on, because we're going to get there. Remember 3 strategies: the art of life, action, reinterpretation. Now this one's very important, okay? Reinterpretation is how we think about what happens. In this case, how we think about sleep. And I can tell you, Ken, and the people that I've worked with, one of the biggest problems is how people think about sleep and how they think about their insomnia. So these are the kinds of things, these are the kinds of interpretations that are going to keep you awake, that are very, very common. If I don't sleep, I'm not going to be able to function tomorrow. Yeah. If I don't sleep, I'm not going to be able to function tomorrow. If I don't sleep, I'm going to be a nightmare. If I don't sleep, it's going to be terrible. If I don't sleep, it's going to reduce my lifespan, right? So if you are telling yourself that something really bad is going to happen because you didn't get a night's sleep, is that going to help you sleep or not? That's not going to help you sleep, right? What that's going to do is it's going to increase performance anxiety. This is one of the biggest things that keeps people awake, performance anxiety. Oh my God, if I don't sleep, I'm going to be a disaster tomorrow. I'm going to screw up the meeting. I'm not going to be able to work. Everything's, and I'm going to live, and I'm going to reduce my lifespan. I better sleep, 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 sleep. This is the biggest problem. You cannot consciously make yourself sleep, right? If you could, I could say you can go to sleep, and you go to sleep. And by the way, even hypnotists can't do that, because when they say sleep, it's not a real sleep. That's something else. It's an altered state of consciousness. There's also quite a lot of role play in that. It's not sleep. When hypnotist says sleep, I promise he's not getting you into sleep. That's not a sleep state. It's an altered state. It's not a sleep state. So if you are creating all this pressure for yourself, you're going to raise your performance anxiety. You're going to raise your arousal, and it's all going to backfire, right? So the very thing that you're telling yourself is actually making it worse. And people need to question that. So I was working with somebody, she said, no, Justin, if I don't sleep, I'm a mess. I'm a total mess. I can't function. I said, okay, here's what I want. What part of her homework? I said, tomorrow. I said, you're not going to sleep. That's not the, you'll see how important this is as well. Tonight, the objective is not to sleep. That's not what we're trying to do. Tonight, you're going to go and do whatever happens. And if you don't sleep, tomorrow, you're going to have a great day. You're just going to make a commitment right now that tomorrow you're going to have a great day. She's like, well, how do I do that? I said, well, I don't know. Imagine that, you're having a great, your mother's life depended on you having a great day. She found a way to have a great day. She did. She said, you're right. I made sure that throughout the day I was kind to myself. I gave a lot of gratitude. I woke up, interesting, I woke up. She said, I stayed in bed a little bit longer, because of course she actually did sleep, right? But I didn't jump out of bed. I gave myself a nice meal. I was she said, and I played nice music, and I had a nice bubble bath, and I actually had a really great day, right? So that we think, this is an external locus of control. No, the quality of my day, depends on this, not sleeping or that. Well, who says? Who says? Actually, that's one area we do have a lot of control. We don't have a lot of control of being able to put ourselves to sleep straight away. We actually do have a lot of control over what kind of day we're going to have, right? And so that broke that preconception, right? That's a very dangerous belief, the belief that I can't have a good day if I don't sleep. Now, I'm not saying, folks, again, to anybody out there, I know what it's like, okay? I get it. I totally get it. It's frustrating, and I know why we have these beliefs, but you just got to know the belief's not helpful, okay? It's not a helpful belief. If you have a belief that says, oh, the reason I can't sleep is because I've got a chemical imbalance. Now, look, I already said, you might want to go to a doctor, you might want to go to a sleep clinic, make sure that there isn't a medical issue. Most people don't have a medical issue, okay? Most people don't. But the idea that I have something physical that is holding me back from sleeping, then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Gosh, I can't sleep because I've got a medical imbalance, so guess what? I don't sleep, right? Because I've now created this belief that I can't sleep. This is the power of belief. Belief is very powerful. If you believe, that there is something that, you can't control, as Anthony Robbins says, the biggest thing stopping you from getting what you want is your bullshit story about why you can't get it. Now apply that to sleep. The biggest thing stopping me from going to sleep is my bullshit story about why I can't sleep, right? Now, again, I'm not saying for some people, it's not a BS story. I get that, please, with respect. Okay, I'm just saying that for many people, in my experience, they have a story they've told themselves, which is actually preventing them going to sleep. I can't sleep because, right? Remember, we're in the second phase of the art of life, reinterpretation. We're going to check our interpretations. This is very, very important, okay? So if you've created some reason why you can't sleep that is beyond your control, now, I can't sleep because of the neighbor and that noise that is made. Or I can't sleep because of the light my partner, I can't sleep because my partner wakes up in the middle of the night to go and take a poo. I can't sleep because, those things, once you've created that, you guaranteed you're not going to sleep, right? And I can tell you, whatever reason you come up with why you can't sleep, I promise you there are people in those same conditions who do sleep, okay? They do. Now, I'm thinking of a client who, she had this idea that the reason she couldn't sleep was because she began to suspect that there was some childhood trauma that she wasn't aware of, but something had happened which was now unconsciously keeping her awake, right? That she couldn't feel safe because of this childhood event. Something had happened that she didn't know about, but she suspected that there was more that she didn't. By the way, this is a classic Freudian psychoanalytic point of view. It's an explanation for anxiety and depression. The reason we're anxious or depressed is because we've repressed some early trauma. And then the theory is that once you became aware of it, then you wouldn't be anxious or depressed. So she had taken that on with insomnia. Well, the reason I can't sleep is because of this trauma. And if I could really sort of work it out and work it through, then it would let my unconscious would let me go to sleep. Now, here's the problem. As we know, psychoanalysis, it's irrefutable because there could always be something that you're not aware of. You could always say, I don't know, that's the whole point. It's unconscious. So I don't know what happened. It was so many years ago. Who can ever verify it? That means that she will be searching forever. And if she says to herself, as she did, I can't sleep until I figure out what it was and resolve it, she will never go to sleep. Okay. So let me assure you that the reason that you can't sleep is not because of what may or may have happened when you were a baby or a child. Okay. I'm not saying that couldn't be an influence for some people. But again, this was just another belief, another reason that she had created for not going to sleep, right? That was actually then preventing her from going to sleep, right? The other would be the misconception, which about even how much sleep I'm getting, which we've touched on. So the idea, people, again, I'm going to repeat this. People will say, I never slept a wink. That is almost never the case, right? And it's not helpful to say that because what you're doing is you're catastrophizing and you're making it worse. The truth is you did sleep. And the belief that when I don't sleep, everything is bad, even when you're not sleeping, you can still be resting. So you could still be resting. If you had a night of not sleeping, I remember once I'd had what it was, that was a very stimulating evening and a coffee and wasn't able to sleep. I put myself into the parasympathetic relaxation response and meditated in bed. And I felt the beautiful warmth of the sheets, or rather the coolness of the sheets. And I first got into bed and I relaxed. And I mean, you can enjoy not sleep. Who says, right? So this idea that I'm not sleeping is bad, it's horrible, it's unpleasurable, it's painful. Well, who says? Actually, my goodness me, you think about most people on this planet, you know, who don't have or many people on this planet who don't have a bed, who don't have perhaps even a blanket. I mean, you're safe, you're secure, you're clean, you've just had a shower. I mean, there's a lot that's right, yeah? And so the question we ask with reinterpretation is, what is right about this? What is right? And sometimes what is right, it just, how could it be worse? Well, you know what, actually, I did sleep yesterday. I know I slept a fair bit yesterday. You know, even if you didn't sleep yesterday and you know that you most certainly did sleep hard yesterday, you know, actually, I'm probably going to sleep, will sleep to some degree tonight, you know. And even when I don't, I'm going to be calm and relaxed. And even when I'm in bed, I'm just going to think of things that I'm grateful for, or I'm going to do a bit of deep breathing. I'm just going to enjoy this, yeah. There is, by the way, a theory that if you really can't sleep and you are waking up in bed, that you should rather get out of bed and then just go do something and only go to bed when you're tired. And I think that's fair. So you could do that as well. So you could say, get up and go do something nice. Don't watch TV, but you know, go and look at the stars, or go meditate or pray, or whatever it is. But I mean, you can have, just because things aren't going the way that you want doesn't mean that there can't be something good. Right? And that's what reinterpretation is. The reason reinterpretation is so powerful, and that question, what is good about it? Remember, the brain is asking what's bad about it, what's wrong, what's terrible. So the brain is going, this is bad, this is terrible. Escalating threat, escalating threat, escalating threat. What is good about it de-escalates threat. It says, yes, it's not ideal. Yes, of course, but you know, what's good? Well, you know what, I'm warm. What's good? Well, actually, I'm on a comfortable bed. What's good? Well, you know, yeah. So this is how reinterpretation can de-escalate threat, which is really very valuable. And what this also does is it reduces performance anxiety. So, you know, this is very interesting. One of the most effective treatments for insomnia is called paradoxical intention. And instead of trying to fall asleep, what you actually do is try to stay awake. And of course, what happens, why is that effective, is because now you're not, in trying to make yourself go to sleep, you're raising your arousal level. Yeah. Like, you know, it's so paradoxical. Like, sleep is something that doesn't happen with trying. Right? Sleep just happens. So all these things that we're doing to try, that's why I said, yes, when it comes to action, create the conditions. You can do that, the sleep hygiene. But when it comes to bed, you've actually got to let go. You've got to surrender. And so this paradoxical intention, I think, has been so effective, because the one thing that you stop doing is trying to sleep. But the great irony is that the very thing that is keeping people up is trying to go to sleep. That's why a lot of the sleep industry really concerns me, because all of these things, okay, some of them are about just creating conditions, respect, but I think a lot of these things are putting us into this trying mindset, you know, this controlling mindset. Other anxiety is really a disorder of control. It's trying to control, right? And so we've got to do the exact opposite, right? We need to be letting go. And so when you say, hey, you know what, when I work with people, I say, hey, what I want you to do, I want you to get comfortable with not sleeping. I'm like, word, I didn't come here to help you to make me comfortable with not sleeping. I said, yeah, but this is part of the healing. I said, you will sleep. But right now, the objective isn't just falling asleep. You've been trying to sleep for months, for some people, years. How's that working for you? So you're not coming to me to try harder to fall asleep. No. We're doing another strategy here. This strategy is about not trying to go to sleep. This strategy is about getting comfortable with not sleeping. The strategy is about finding even the good in not sleeping. The strategy is about removing the performance anxiety of having to go to sleep, which is what's going to keep you awake. Yeah. So that's why I say the first objective is success is not going to sleep tonight. That's what I say to people. Anybody, if you're struggling with something, that's not, you might sleep through the night. Great. That's not what success is. Success is insomnia and being okay with it. Because when you stop trying, that is when you'll fall asleep, right? And so you have to stop trying. And the only way to stop trying is one of the ways is to change your interpretation of what it means not to sleep. Okay, so that's really important. So I know I'm harping on this. It's just really important for people to investigate their own preconceptions about sleep. And so, anybody who's got insomnia, what are your beliefs about sleep? And you want to turn that belief around, right? So anything that says I have to sleep or bad things happen when I don't sleep, I understand you're coming to this because you ultimately want to sleep. But we're talking about a night of insomnia or 2 nights or a night here and there. There's no problem, okay? And you've got to now convince your brain about that at any point in the night when you're not sleeping, that's okay. That is okay. It's not a problem. And when you are okay with it, you are far more likely to go to sleep. Now, this can't be, okay, I'm going to tell myself it's okay. I'm going to tell myself it's okay so that I can go to sleep. It's okay, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. Okay, now go to sleep. Okay, that's not it either, okay? That's why this is genuine. You have to really, really build this belief, okay, that this is okay for the moment. Okay, this is the path. This is the path of healing. This is the path of healing. So, that's reinterpretation, okay? I'm just going to recap there. The best interpretation is that it is okay not to sleep. I'm probably sleeping more than I think. If I don't sleep, there can still be a lot of good. I can relax. I can be okay with it. I can actually even feel pretty good, and it can actually be quite restful, even if I'm not sleeping. So it's okay, yeah? And best of all, in learning to be okay with not going to sleep is ultimately how I'm going to go to sleep. Okay, so that's your biggest motivation. Your biggest motivation for being okay with not sleeping is that ultimately that's how you're going to go to sleep, right? Because what's going to happen? You're going to stop trying. You're going to turn down the effort. That means you're going to turn down the arousal. When you turn down the arousal, guess what's happening? You're going to sleep. All right, good. So that's reinterpretation. How are we doing, Cand?
We're doing great, Jess. So we've covered action, which is, of course, the sleep hygiene, which is great to have, but not obsessively, but just creating the right conditions, right? Reinterpreting, not basing your existence on sleep and saying, oh, when I don't sleep, I'm a nightmare, or my life falls apart, or I can't achieve, or I can't do this, which it's easy to do because the brain does that, right? It looks for evidence to support the notion that the reason this is falling apart is because you're not sleeping, and therefore it creates a bigger narrative, which is so important. And now we're going on to T.
Exactly. So T is coup de grace, transcendence. So what do we do in the moments of frustration that we can't sleep? Because I know with reinterpretation, we're saying we're hopefully going to get into a state where we are okay. And that's very important in terms of interpreting what sleep and not sleeping is. But that's not to say that you're still not going to have moments when you are frustrated. And what you're going to notice is that what keeps you up are your thoughts. Now, we've spoken about how we need to get the best possible interpretation. Yeah, the best possible interpretation is that this is okay. But what happens when a thought pops into your head? Like, oh my God, I'm not sleeping. Oh my God, I'm going to be a nightmare tomorrow. Or the other thoughts that keep us awake, which are usually not even about sleeping. They're about the presentation I have to give tomorrow, or my kids, or the school, or what's wrong, right? What's keeping us up is overthinking, right? And I refer to this as worrying, analysis, and rumination. Now, thinking is the superpower that it's enabled us to master the universe, right? The ability to learn from the past, the ability to plot and plan the future. Overthinking is like inflammation. It's an addictive immune response. It is addictive. Thinking is addictive because it actually, if you think about it, the brain's going, there's something wrong, thinking will fix it, right? So if I feel like something is wrong, I want to think, right? It's very compelling, right? But actually overthinking doesn't lead to solutions. That's why women who worry about a lump in their breast, big warriors who have a lump in their breast, are less likely to go to the doctor to get it checked out than women who are not big warriors. They're actually more likely to go check it out, yeah? Because the worrying actually becomes a substitute for action, right? So this kind of overthinking is not helpful. So when you're in bed and you're doing that overthinking, it's very important to understand that overthinking is not helping you, right? But the brain does it. And so worrying is a particular kind of overthinking that is linked to anxiety, and rumination is a particular kind of thinking that is linked to depression. Rumination is when you go round and round in your mind about negative events, looking for their causes and consequences, replaying them, yeah, over and over. That's rumination. So that kind of overthinking is arousal, right? It's mental arousal. It's often driven by adrenaline and cortisol. And that's usually what keeps people up, right? It's that kind of overthinking. Now, there are different strategies that you can use. For instance, if you're thinking about tomorrow, you might want to get out of bed and write down what you need to do tomorrow, do a to-do list, and deal with it so that you can put it aside, right? You can even set worry periods. You can say, well, look, now I need to go to sleep. Thank you, brain. I know that you really care about me and that you're concerned about me, but we are safe. We are okay. We do have to deal with some things, but we're going to deal with them tomorrow, okay? So when I wake up tomorrow, that's when I'm going to deal with it, right? So you can see how you're just putting it off. Either you're going to make the to-do list now, put it away, do this thing tomorrow, that's when we're going to do it, okay? And so those are also strategies that can help you to settle the thinking, right? As long as you're doing that kind of overthinking, you're going to stay awake, that's arousal. So when the thinking comes, so it's very important that people understand that, because sometimes I think that their thinking is helpful. Okay? It's not helpful. So you got to know it's not helpful. Okay? So once you know it's not helpful and that it's just your brain, overreactive threat detection system, right? That is just amplifying threats and wants you to fix and solve, and yeah, that's what your brain's doing. Just know it. It's okay. So what do we do with transcendence, right? Because we know that trying to suppress a thought doesn't help, right? Trying to think of a pink elephant, trying to think of a pink elephant, and you are going to think of a pink elephant, right? Try and suppress the thought of tomorrow, that's probably not going to help you either, right? Because the thought it's an automatic thought. It's an intrusive thought. So what can you do with the thought? And this is where transcendence comes in. Allow. Now, allow doesn't mean that you now get lost in the thought and get engaged with the thought and do problem solving. Allow means there is a thought. Being able to identify that that thought is just a thought. It's a mental event. It's produced by your brain. You don't need to deal with it. And so you just let the thought be there. And this is the first of the three principles of transcendence. Allow. Let it be there. Okay, without engaging. Okay, this is the one thing that is important, is that the moment you notice yourself getting lost in the thoughts, you need to just pull back and say, it's just a thought, right? Now, we have a technique, and as you know, allow now. You can name the thought. You can actually say, there's a thought. There's a thought. Or there's worrying. There's rumination. There's overthinking. You can even say, there's my overreactive brain, right? And what that does by naming it is it helps to separate you from the thought, so that you realize the thought, you de-identify, you detach from the thought, right? So you become, in effect, the observer of the thought rather than merged with the thought. And so you just acknowledge that there's a thought. Okay, that's it. Okay. Yeah. You can also, you can name it, you can observe it. So you can just be conscious. Oh, there's a thought. I'm not going to get lost in it. I'm not going to attach to it. I'm not going to get married to it. It's just there. It's okay. It's just there. And there'll be another one. And there'll be another one. And there'll be another. And so name and observe, name and observe. And even now, name, observe, welcome. When I say welcome, it doesn't mean welcome, let me now talk about this. It's a little bit like, imagine somebody's talking. You can talk back at them, or you can just let them talk. So you're just accepting. Okay, there's your brain. It loves you. It cares about you. It wants to be safe. So it's putting these thoughts out. Name. I find naming and observing to be the most helpful, but some people even tell me even welcoming, like just being okay with it. Like, it's okay, I get it. You know, it's like my brain cares and loves me and has just created this little thought. It's fine, right? But the main idea is with transcendence is allow. Just allow it to be there without identifying. The second step is release. right? So we don't release, which is really part of that. You can see how these really totally intersect, is that even by naming and observing, you're releasing, right? You're not attaching, you're not identifying. And then transcend. Now, transcend, all these principles, of course, apply to anxiety and all the other issues that we deal with on how to get over it. But when it comes to sleep, transcend is sleep. Transcend is, and I get past my arousal, I get past my thoughts and I sleep. That's not something you do. You don't do that. You don't control that. You don't make that happen. Transcend comes as a consequence of you allowing and releasing. Okay, that's it. And the truth is, ideally, do nothing. Do nothing. Sleep happens through surrender. So these principles are just guiding principles. I don't want anybody to think, okay, now I must allow now, and I'm not going to name it. I'm going to just, yeah, it's a little technique that, particularly if you have a lot of thoughts, just name the thoughts, observe it, let it be there, but don't do as little as possible. What I've come to realize is even doing a deep breathing technique in bed, it can help, but I don't even want to advise that because that's a doing thing. Oh, I'm going to do my deep breathing. Now I'm going to do that before you go to bed. That's your slowing the car down, right? That's getting you ready for bed. Beautiful. Before you go to bed, do your gratitude. When you're in bed, you want to actually be doing as little as possible. You actually want to be not doing. Yeah, that's what you want to be. You want to be. This is just do nothing. Just do nothing. Okay, that's what ultimate transcendence is about. But yes, if you are assailed with thoughts, you can just gently name or observe. Gently name or observe. There they are. There they are. Yes, if you are breathing and you're in your chest and you're panting and you're fine. Yes, you can be conscious of, okay, just make sure that I'm a bit of belly breathing, but you don't want to be sitting there for an hour doing belly breathing. You know, I know people have got all sorts of techniques. I'm going to count sheep and I'm going to count backwards from 7 and I'm going to do this. So some people, it works for some people. My concern with some of those techniques is they themselves can be quite arousing. They can be quite arousing. And what we actually want to do is we want the opposite of arousal, right? We want to let go. And in my experience, if you do this, you'll start to see, if you don't identify those thoughts, if you don't get lost in the thought, if you don't get lost in the story, sleep comes. It comes for you. But you know, I always feel like I want to change the lingo here. You know, it's not so much I am going to sleep, it's that sleep is going to me. That's pretty cool, huh? Yeah, right? That's the thing, right? I literally just kind of formulated that. And I think I am going to sleep. That's control, focus, deliberation, consciousness, the opposite of sleep. No. Sleep is going to me when I create the conditions. Yes, the whole sleep industry is all about the external conditions, fine. I would say the internal conditions are even more important. What are the internal conditions? The internal conditions are allow, release, right? The internal conditions are, we have to let go of the threat, of the fixation on the threat, of what's wrong. Because sleep can't come to me if I am focused on danger. That would be crazy. Why would my brain let me go to sleep if my brain was convinced that I was in danger? Can't do that. So I have to tell consciously, I know this is kind of crazy the way we talk about ourselves, but there's a conscious and an unconscious. There's the kind of me that identifies, and then there's that threat detector. I've got to tell my brain, we're good, guy. Yeah, we're okay. Yeah? And there may be an issue. We'll deal with it tomorrow. There may be an issue. We're okay here. Yeah. And when I have done that, when I have taken away any sort of threat perception, then sleep will come, because now I'm safe. Now I'm safe. And that's what my brain wants. Your brain loves you. brain loves you lots and lots. Yeah? She just wants you to be safe. And so we got to almost like an overreactive mother. We can say, it's okay, we're good here. And the truth is, she doesn't sometimes always get it. So sometimes she continues, right? But then what you do is you don't get into a conversation with her. Then you just say, it's just a thought. It's just a mental event. Just let it be. Let it be. Let it be. I will not sing that. It'll be a disaster. This whole series.
I was holding out. I was so excited. Oh, man. No, Jess, I think for me, what I really do love about the transcendence method and what has worked effectively for me is disengaging from the idea that we are our thoughts, right? So when you are in a situation, being able to name it and saying, this is a thought, it seems so basic, but it's one of those things that when you do it, your body manages to detach and say, okay, this is a thought. I don't need to fight it. I don't need to engage with it. I don't need to assume it as who I am, but I can just let it go, and it's almost like that disengagement is the key to this principle of not being so attached to what your brain tells you.
Absolutely, and absolutely. I think I actually feel quite heartsore for the majority of the world who believe their thoughts. Who think that if I've had a thought, it must be true, I must believe it, and if I've had the thought, it's my thought, so it actually represents me, it's who I am. Yeah, I mean, if I was judged on my thoughts, I'd be in prison a long time ago. I mean, I've got some crazy thoughts, right? And most people do, but I think people struggle with that. Like, well, if I'm having a thought, it needs attending to, it needs dealing with. That's my thought. And exactly that, and yes, it's just a mental event. The brain is complex. It's a lot of it's driven by this hyperreactive threat detection system. And so you can just allow the thoughts to be there. And it's so liberating, when you realize that you're not the thoughts, it's just the thoughts. And yes, that's how, that's why I'm so glad we've done this on insomnia, because this applies, as you know, to anxiety and to emotional distress. What's emotional distress? What's anxiety? It's holding on, it's hanging on, it's attaching, it's resisting. The irony, what is people, so as Carl Jung said, what you resist will not just persist, it'll grow in size, right? So we know that with anxiety, right? The more you persist, the more you push, the more you don't want it to be there, it'll be there. And of course, you can see exactly how this applies to insomnia. The more I push, the more I try to go to sleep, the more frustrated I am that I'm not going to sleep, the less I sleep, right? And so it's this paradoxical intention when I go, it's okay. It is what it is. I don't control it. I mean, this is another important thing. So much of the self-help movement is all about you're in control. You're the master. This is your life. Make it happen. You're the master of your mind and your life. That's what got me into so much trouble, because that works really well for the external world, right? There's definitely a place for that, right? Internal locus of control, believing that you have mastery, going out there and making shit happen. Absolutely, right? Love it, powerful. When it comes to your own mind, very different, right? The internal world's different to the external world. And if you take that approach to your internal mind, that's how you land up with an anxiety disorder, because you don't control every thought. Do you know what thought you're going to have in the next minute? No. Your brain produces thoughts, right? And so when you can actually just allow and accept, there's no more fight, And that's as I always say, in this game, victory is surrender. Lay down your arms. You can't go to sleep when you've got armor and a gun and you better go to sleep now. That's not the way you go to sleep, right? You've got to let go. And that's why anybody who's struggling with insomnia, I really want to encourage you to really take on these tools, because in my experience, the people that I've worked with, and I'm really, really proud to say we've had such great results with this. They will tell me that this has affected virtually every other area of their life. They're suddenly more accepting. It's like they actually say, thank God I had insomnia, because it actually brought me to the realization that I was anxious and controlling in every other area of my life. And I'm now learning how not to be. I had a woman say to me, things have just become easier. I'm not trying as hard anymore. This is a very effective person, and she's been doing great, but she was under this impression that she needed more, and that effort, of course, was keeping her awake, but it was also producing a lot of anxiety in her life. And so her resolving her insomnia actually resolved a lot of her anxiety too. So if you have insomnia, I know it's a journey. It's going to take time to get there. Remember, the secret is not, the success is not going to sleep, right? The success is about being okay with not sleeping. And that's how you ultimately go to sleep. And I think what you'll see is that is what can so positively impact every other area of your life.
Oh, yes. Thank you once again for another impactful session. And I look forward to speaking to you again in the next one.
Thank you so much, Ken. Always great pleasure. Bye.
Bye.